Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot and a PMDG 777 beta tester. Welcome to our first tutorial on the PMDG Boeing 777. Before we start, I would like to thank all those rated 777 pilots who helped me master this aircraft throughout the beta process. Now, a quick advert over here. If you're interested in a written version of this tutorial, I'm currently producing an ebook that is going to teach you everything you need to know about flying the PMDG 777 with the help of rated 777 pilots. If you're interested, more information in the video description below. And now let's get right into the tutorial. We're going to start with the airplane cold and dark. Now, many airlines would also give you their aircraft in an already powered panel state. So we are doing this one cold and dark for the sake of completeness, especially since it will become relevant when the freighter becomes available. But both cold and dark and a fully powered panel state can be realistic starts. If you have yours fully powered already, then you can skip over the cold and dark setup and go forward to the preliminary pre-flight procedure right afterwards. And now let's get straight into it. The first thing is to turn on the battery on the electrical panel. You will notice that not all that much actually happens. The plane remains dark and there is hardly any sounds playing because most of the electrical power is automatically load-shed through the system. Now, next up, we need to ensure that our aircraft is safe to power up before we actually do so. And we do that by looking at the hydraulic panel and verifying that the C1 and C2 primary pump switches are off and that the demand pump selectors are all in the off position. Then we move down a little bit and check that the wipers are off on both sides and that the landing gear lever is in the down position. Finally, we move a little bit to the right and ensure that the alternate flap selector is in the off position. From here on, we can go ahead and establish electrical power. Now, there is two different ways how to do this. The first one is using external power, the second is using the APU. Airlines will normally favor external power over the APU as it reduces the fuel consumption. In order to power it up, we verify that the bus tie switches are in the auto position. This is going to verify correct distribution of the power to the aircraft's respective buses. Now, when the primary and secondary power avail lights are illuminated, then we can turn on those systems. If only a single power source is connected, you can also just run the airplane off that single power source. Now, should the APU be desired at this point, select the APU selector from off into the on position and then over to start and back into the on position automatically. And that is going to initiate the startup process. Most airlines will try to minimize APU usage, however, especially when it is hot outside, the APU may be required for air conditioning. Always remember that you've got that huge fuselage of an aircraft where a lot of sun is shining onto, so aircraft do have a tendency to heat up really quickly. For that reason, even with just 21 degrees centigrade outside, which would normally be a temperature that would be neither hot nor cold, the aircraft might heat up much quicker. For that reason, we are going to start up the APU just now, so APU selected to on, then to start, and it will automatically jump back into the on position. Now it takes approximately a minute for the APU to start up. The airplane itself takes rather long to boot, so the displays just takes their time. They might flicker a little bit. The same goes for the FMS down here. So in that time, it's best just to let the airplane alone and let it run through its boot process. But we can make good use of this time as we have to go outside and do the outside check. Now, if you really want to skip most of the outside check, there are a couple of important things that you really should not skip in the PMDG 777. And we're going to have a look at these right now. So, PMDG models damage to the tires and models the brakes wearing down, and this is stuff that pilots check during their walk-around amongst many others. But even if you want to do just a very brief walk around, then at least have a look at the tires, make sure that there is no damage on the rubbers and that they sit properly on their mountings and that the general condition is okay. Like we can see it over here where we've got brand new tires fitted to our aircraft. From here on we can move backwards towards the main gears, and over here as well every wheel individually can wear down and start to fail. So we need to check the tire conditions of all the tires, and we also need to check the brake wear indicator pins. Now the brake wear indicator pins are located down here, and it's this pin on this side and this one on that side, and you've got those on all of the wheels separately. In order to be able to check their condition, the parking brake needs to be set. So let's go to the flight deck one more time, and we are going to set the parking brake down here. If you have chosen the realistic parking brake option, then you need to press your brake pedals down, and then you can set the brake into position, and you can see this holds the pedals in their depressed position. Only when the brakes are set, the brake wear indicator pins can be checked. So if we go back outside again, then now we can see, okay, there's plenty of metal over here. Basically, the brake wear indicator pins function in a way that they are being used up when the brake is being used, and once they're flushed with the metal over here, that's the indication that the brake needs to be replaced. So we gotta check those on all the wheels, and we also gotta check the general condition of the wheels and the tires. So going along here, we can see all of those. Down here we've got the indicator pins on this side, and then we also need to do the same on the other side. And this is the minimum check that you should do in terms of the outside check of your aircraft. So check the tire condition, check the brake conditions. There is a little shortcut available for those in the Universal Flight Tablet though, and we are going to have a look at that little shortcut right now. So let's go back inside, and we can have a look into the Universal Flight Tablet on the ground operations menu. If you go over here and then to the ground maintenance page, you can see that over here you've got visual indications of the status of all your tires. So right now we can see that some of them have seen a little bit of wear, but in general they are in a good condition. If any tire was completely worn down, you could also see that right over here. Alright, and this concludes our electrical power-up and the basic outside inspection. From here we can go into the preliminary pre-flight procedure as soon as our aircraft has booted up. You can see all the displays are on, and since we were outside we didn't hear it, but the completion of the electrical power-up is basically indicated by the test of the loudspeaker, and you can just not miss that. So the preliminary pre-flight procedure assumes that the electrical power-up is complete, and first of all we start with the ADIRU, which is the 777 equivalent of an IRS, easily said. Now we ensure that the switch has been off for 30 seconds, and then we are going to switch it on right up here. The alignment process can take anywhere between a couple of minutes all the way to 15 through 18 minutes, and it is going to be shortest when you're close to the equator, and it's going to take longest the closer you are to the magnetic North and South Pole. So going on from here, we have a look at the status page. We can open different pages through the display select panel that we can find on the glare shield over here. The upper three buttons control on which of the three screens the information is shown. So you've got the left MFD, the right MFD, and then you've got the center panel. And today we want to display it on the center panel. So we press the status button over here, and this calls up the status page where we've got a lot of different indications. Amongst others, we're going to check that the hydraulic quantity is looking good. And how do we know if we have sufficient quantity available? Well, if we didn't, then the quantity indication would show in inverse video, and there would be an RF next to it, which stands for refill required. So as long as you don't see the RF next to one of the quantities, you know that you have sufficient hydraulic quantity on board. We also verify that only expected messages are shown down here. So in our case, we've got a TCAS message, which is caused by the ADIRU alignment not being complete yet. And during the boot up process, there may be different messages there, such as the loudspeaker message while the test is in progress and so on. So verify that down here you only see expected messages. Next we check that we've got sufficient oxygen pressure available. The 777 FCOM includes a chart for the minimum pressure required depending on certain circumstances for the flight. For example, if you're flying over mountainous terrain where you cannot do an emergency descent to flight level 100, such as in the Himalaya region, then more oxygen might be required. But in general, if you see anything above 1000, then you should be fine for most flights. Also, we ensure that the APU oil quantity is sufficient for the flight, and in case you are not using the APU, you can display the oil quantity by just moving the APU selector into the on position without flicking it to start. After about 10 seconds, the APU oil quantity is going to show down here, and you can check that sufficient is on board. From there on, we are going to have a look at the engine display. So on the display select panel, we can select ENG, and this calls up the secondary engine display. And down here we ensure that sufficient oil quantity is available for our flight. Now, this becomes especially relevant when you have selected the PMDG options to save the previously used fluid. So this can be done in PMDG setup and options, simulation. And now, if you hit the next page button, you will eventually find Save Fluids on Exit. When this is being used, then your oil quantity from the previous flight is going to be saved, and this may eventually drain down the oil quantities pretty quickly. So you gotta pay good attention to that and verify that sufficient oil is available for the flight. So from here, we just need to know what is the minimum quantity. So minimum oil quantity for a flight of less than 6 hours is 17 quarts. So 17 for a flight of less than 6 hours and 20 for a flight of more than 6 hours. So from here on, we move up to the ICAS again, and we ensure that any message we see in there is indeed expected. So what we do is, first of all, we cancel all the messages that are currently shown using the cancel recall button down here. So cancel everything away, and then we do a recall to ensure that indeed every message that we see is expected and that there is no hidden message that might have been cancelled earlier by another crew. So now we're going to go over this. So we've got nav ADRU inertial, that's because the ADRU is not aligned yet. Hydraulic pressure systems left, center and right. Of course, we don't have our hydraulics pressurized yet. Engine shutdown, well, that is expected. Landing altitude, you've got that because the FMC does not know our route yet. Pack left and pack right at this moment. Well, the packs are currently shut down, so that message is expected. Then ELEC IFE seats and ELEC cabin utility off. Those are two messages that we do not expect to see at this point. So we can now analyze as to why these messages are showing. Before you go into the technical logbook and check if anything is broken, have a quick look at the overhead panel and you will find that these switches are currently actually off while they are not supposed to be. So we can simply go ahead and turn them on and you will see that now the messages are going away. So that's what I meant. Carefully check all the messages you see down here. So next we got a TCAS message, which is expected since the TCAS is off. Brake source is also expected since we don't have hydraulics. Emergency lights are expected because they are turned off. SATCOM and SAT voice lost are currently expected because we are on the ground and the satellite communication system cannot connect before the ADRU is aligned. So this completes our analysis of the first page. Then we got the page 1 down here indicating that a second page is available. So if we click the cancel button, you can see that this now pulls up the second page. Window heat. As you can see, the window heat switches are off, so that message is expected. And finally, fuel pressure, engine left and right is expected because our fuel pumps are currently turned off. When all messages have been analyzed, cancel them away so that anything new that pops up is going to come right to your attention. So, with these procedures finished, we can go ahead and do the oxygen check. And for that, we go back to the status page up here. And with status selected, we remember the oxygen pressure that we currently see down here. Next we go to the oxygen mask, ensure that the selector is in the 100% position, and then we can press the test reset switch. You can see for about a second we have oxygen flowing over here. Next up, you would rotate the selector to the emergency position, but unfortunately PMDG does currently not model this in the 777, but you would rotate it to the emergency position, hold down the switch for 5 seconds in a row, and at the same time check the oxygen pressure indication on the status display. You want to ensure that the oxygen needle does not jump around, so there is no jumping in the indications, and that the oxygen only depletes slowly. When the test is completed, select the rotary selector back into the 100% position or into the norm position if you're about to fly over mountainous terrain and need to conserve oxygen. And this completes the preliminary pre-flight procedure. So our aircraft is now in the same state that it would normally be when the aircraft was received previously through an engineer. However, when you receive the airplane powered up from an engineer, you still check the hydraulic, oil and oxygen quantities and carry out the oxygen system test. You also ensure that the brakes are in a good condition, just like we've did beforehand. So this concludes this first tutorial of the PMDG 777. In the next one we are going to start with our CDU pre-flight procedure, but that is going to be for a separate video. Again, if you want to read up on anything that we have discussed in this tutorial, I can very much recommend you to check out my 777 ebook. More information in the video description below. Thank you very much for watching, and I see you all again on the next one. Finally, if you really like the video, be sure to like, comment to let me know what you think about it, and subscribe to the channel. And if you really love what I'm doing, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and see you all again on the next one.